Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody, depending on where you are. My name is Craig Elias, and in the next 25 minutes, I'm going to share with you 3 simple ways to beat your competition to the punch by using social selling. I'm going to share with you how you can use social selling to be first, how you can use it to be preferred, and then how you can use it to be the one that gets chosen to provide the product or service that you're selling. And right near the end, I'm going to share with you the power of a term called propinquity and its ability to also help you close more business. So my name is Craig Elias, and for about 20 years, I was just a lucky sales guy. And I am number 15 on the Forbes list of the most social salespeople on the planet. I am LinkedIn user 3,956. I had my 12-year anniversary back on May 13th. And when you hear other people during this series talk about trigger events or triggers, I'm the guy that in 2002 figured this out and wrote a book all about this. If you would like my slides in their native PowerPoint format and the book, all you need to do is go to the website called shiftselling.com/social. SHIFTSELLING, shiftselling.com/social. And I will email you the slides and also an entire copy of the book. So, first piece of this is all about how do you be first. And in the summer 2002, I did some reflection on my biggest wins, all my 6, 7, 8-figure deals. And one of the things I figured out was the power impact of being first, and also the challenge. And what I realized is that when we're all out there selling, the people we're selling to are always in one of 3 different buying modes. First one's called status quo. You can think of this as path dependency. This is the people that are happy with what they have and see no reason to change. They've done the same thing for so long, it's just simple to keep doing the same old thing. So these are the people that are happy with what they have and not looking to change. And I don't think I get any argument when I would say that the odds that someone who's in the buying mode of status quo becoming your customer in the next little while, pretty close to 0. Now, on the other end of the spectrum are these buyers that are actively engaged in a process of searching for alternatives. And I've seen different research. Xerox in 1979, heard of Xerox's research, haven't seen it. And I've seen Aberdeen's research that says if you get to people while they're in this buying mode of searching for alternatives, unhappy and doing something about it, the odds you get the business is about 16%. So 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 7 deals. And for those of you that have read the Challenger Sale, I took something off their website back in February, and I agree with them. It says that today's purchasing behavior has forced us into a spot where you've got to be first in to even stand a chance. So the question is, what's first in? Well, what I figured out is that first in is first in with somebody who's in what I call a window of dissatisfaction. These are the people that are unhappy with what they have, but they're so busy solving other problems, they haven't gotten to this problem yet. And I did some research for my first company that won a $1 billion idea contest and got a $1 million prize. And I asked senior executives and also senior salespeople, if you were first in, what are the odds you win the business? When I did this in 2003, the number I got back was 75%. Forrester's done similar research 10 years later, and it's almost exactly the same. So you want to be first in with those people that are just become unhappy but have not started doing anything about it yet. And then when you get to these decision makers, when you're first in and you win the business, they tend to be way more profitable, way more loyal, and if you ask, they'll act as a reference and they'll give you testimonials. So the whole thing about being first in, I did a webinar earlier this year, and I asked a question on that webinar. Of all the deals you lost, what percentage of those do you think you could have won if you had been first in? And half half of the people on that webinar said they would have won at least 40% or more of the deals that they lost if only they'd been first in. And in the summer of 2002, this was something I was trying to figure out. How could somebody be in this buying mode of status quo on Monday, be in the window of dissatisfaction on Wednesday, and start searching for alternatives on Friday? What was different? What had changed? And what I realized, it was based upon a sequence of events, very specific triggers that would cause someone to move between these different buying modes. The first event is when somebody wants to change. When you focus on these people, it will fill your funnel with high value leads. The second event is when someone can all of a sudden afford the time to look at what you've got or afford the money to buy it. And when that happens, it moves people down your funnel. But it's not until they have a third event, when they can justify the purchase to other people, that they actually do anything about it. So they have to have all three events. I want to change, I can afford to change, I can justify the change. And when they have all three, they will then buy. And for years, I talked about this, and then luckily enough, in 2009, McKinsey came along, and they did some research, and they figured out almost the exact same thing. Their loyalty loop, the thing in the middle, is my status quo. And that people leave the loyalty loop when they have a specific trigger that creates interest in doing something different. And that when they have that initial event or trigger, they create what's called an initial consideration set. And then they start the process of the active evaluation, and then they can decide, justify. The only thing that's different between what I figured out and what McKinsey talks about is that I don't think people start the active evaluation until they have the afford trigger. They can afford to look or afford to buy. Then, luckily enough, in 2011, Google came along. They came out with something they call the zero moment of truth. That's my window of dissatisfaction. And this zero moment of truth is created by a stimulus. The stimulus in my world, that's a trigger event. Demand generation. A guy named Andrew Gaffney did some research in 2013, and they asked decision makers of the last major purchase that you made, how many of them were unbudgeted and unplanned. And it turns out that in 80% of the cases, the new B2B purchase was not planned for at the end of the fiscal year or even in the budget. Something came along and made things more important, and all of a sudden they took budget from one place and they put it somewhere else. So everybody gets it. But the question is, do salespeople get it? So Andrew asked the question of senior decision makers, of the last major purchase that you made, how often was it a salesperson that reached out and initiated the process? And you have four choices here: 53%, 33%, 10%, 3%. Now, we'd all like to think it's 53 or 33 or even 10. It turns out that only 3% of the time is it salespeople that are reaching out to decision makers and initiating the process. Now, a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to call, because they don't want to talk to me. They want to do their own research on their own. There's a group called the IT Sales and Marketing Association, and they actually ask decision makers, what percentage of you want to talk to salespeople during the early stages of the buying process? And 70% said they wanted to talk to a salesperson during the early stages of the process. Now, sometimes people say one thing but do something else. But the truth is, they do exactly what they talked about. 75% of decision makers, Discover Aura did some research, and they found out that 75% of the decision makers took an appointment or attended an event based upon a well-timed outbound email or a call. So these events that make people want to change, what are these events? Well, it turns out these events come in three forms. The first one we try already. You pick up the phone, you call someone, you try to bust the status quo, challenge is what the challenger sale says, right? You try to use things like we're better, faster, cheaper. You'll avoid risk. The only thing I found that really works is if they have to change, they will. Risk avoidance, maybe. The research I've seen that if you try to challenge the status quo, if you don't have a phenomenal relationship, and if there hasn't been something that busts the status quo, you might get first appointments. But the research I've seen says that less than 7% of the time will you actually get a second appointment. And if you want to get the second appointment, you need to focus on the next two events that I'm going to share with you. First one is when someone has a bad experience. They have a bad experience because, let's say, there's been a change of salespeople or customer service people, maybe even someone in accounting within your competition. Maybe they change the product and the customer is no longer happy, or maybe there's a material change in the provider, very often caused by a merger or an acquisition. Awareness is what we try. Bad experience is what happens to the competition, but I'm a big fan of what happens inside our prospects. And this is when there's changes inside the organization, a change in people, places, or priorities. And the big one for me is a change in people, a change in decision makers. Discover or did some research, and again, asking senior decision makers about stuff they'd done when they took on a new role. About 40% of the ones they talked to or surveyed said they made decisions worth $1 million or more within the first year on the job. And of those people that make $1 million worth of decisions in the first year, 80% of those made those decisions within the first 90 days in their job. So the question is, how can you use social selling to find a way to be first in when decision makers change their job? Well, it turns out LinkedIn has a really cool feature called a saved search. You go to LinkedIn, you create a search, you can then save that search, and then every week, if you say every week, you want to be updated, every week it will email you and say, hey, guess what? There's new people on this list. And when I started doing this, I was getting about 1,200 different opportunities every single week. I got to cherry pick who it was that I actually went and talked to. So the question then becomes a little bit about who do you cherry pick? So for me, the next step, first is be first. The next step is how do you become the person that is preferred? And I'm a big believer that people, no matter who they are, make decisions based upon emotion, but they justify their decision with logic after the fact. And if you want to be preferred, you need to be what I call the emotional favorite. There's an entire chapter in the book all about how do you become someone's emotional favorite. If you are their emotional favorite, they're the ones, you're the one that they prefer to do business with. You're the one that they know, like, trust, and more importantly, the ones they want to see succeed. But building these kind of relationships takes time and it takes effort. So for me, the question is, who are the people that are worth taking the time to build relationships with? Who do you want to be the emotional favorite of? And in the book, there's an exercise that I lead you through that talks about who are the people at the very top that you want to get to. These are the people that have money, authority, and influence. And the reason that these people are so important is, remember those three events? I want to change, I can afford to change, and I can justify the change. Well, the cool thing is the people that have money, authority, and influence, they only have to have the first event, and then they can become your customer. So what I've done is just giving you an example here. Pick the CFO of a specific size of organization. Now, maybe there's not enough of these, and you need to figure out who's on the path of becoming the CFO of a manufacturing company that's $10 to $20 million. So what I've realized is that 80% of the time, it's someone from a smaller organization with the same role that moves in and takes on that role. 20% of the time, it's on the right. That's from within the organization. Again, if you go through this list and you now want to be the emotional favorite of more people, do the exact same exercise. These are the people that either have money, authority, and influence, or are on the career path of highly likely to have at some point in the near future money, authority, and influence. So you need to find a way to be the emotional favorite of these people. And even when you're the emotional favorite, when something happens and they want to buy and they think of you, odds are they don't have your business card around. So one of the things I love to do is I want to make it really easy to be found on social media. I have social media profiles on all kinds of different places because people, odds are in front of their computer more times than not. They're going to go to Google, not LinkedIn, not Twitter, not Facebook, not Pinterest or Google Plus and say, where's Craig Elias? They go to Google and type in Craig Elias. And you want your name to show up everywhere they go. And one of the ways to make that happen is to have all these different social media profiles. So this is something I think everybody should do. Doesn't mean they're looking for you on Twitter and Facebook, but that's where they're going to find you. And then when they find you on LinkedIn, one of the things you want to make it really easy is for them to be able to reach you. What you'll notice down on the bottom left-hand corner, it says, I am LinkedIn user 3956, and the best way to reach me is phone/text. You want to make it really easy for someone to be able to contact you, not just find you. And I'm a big believer that your phone number, your cell phone number more specifically, should be everywhere that you can put it. Now, above and beyond that, I've also put a little bit about myself, who I'm at. I'm a guy who lives by integrity. I value family, creativity, persistence, and my motto is no regrets. Let people learn about who you are, not just what you do. Quite a while ago now, a guy named Charlie Green wrote a book called The Trusted Advisor. And I saw a white paper he did a few years ago that talked about the people that are most trusted. And it turns out the people that are most trusted are what he calls the doer. These are the people that have reliability and intimacy. So they do what they say they're going to do, but they also have this incredible ability of getting the other person to share information that can be valuable in the selling process. So my question is, it's not just about focusing on people that have money, authority, and influence. You need to see if there is what I call a psychographic match. The question is, how well do those you're trying to become the emotional favorite of, how well do they know your interests? What do you like to do? One of my favorite stories is of an account I was trying to get into. They were doing $10 million with three of my competitors, and they were doing, I forget, it was $30,000 or $60,000 with us. And I looked at that account and said, that's where I'm going to blow my quota, and I'm going to smoke all my competition. This is where I need to go spend more time. And I started spending time within this account. And I learned very quickly that a whole bunch of the guys in that account, the engineers who were responsible for speccing my product into something they would then sell, all loved a mountain bike. And I arranged a mountain biking trip in Whistler. And very shortly after that mountain biking trip, there was 19 of them that showed up. We went from the 30 or 60 grand to almost $3 million. And once someone understands your interests, then you need to try and see, is there some sort of fit between your values? Do you share the same values? For me, it's family, creativity, and persistence. Those are the things I care about. And then for me, the next step is, once you've gone to that step, you want to share your aspirations. How do you want to make the world a better place? Because when there's that kind of alignment between you and the other person, they're much more likely to choose you. The question, though, is how can you do this also using social selling? Well, it turns out LinkedIn has a really cool place where you can talk about your interests. So I have that on my LinkedIn profile. I talk about the things that I do, the fact that I'm a Cub Scout leader. I'm one of these crazy guys in my neighborhood who, when it's minus 20 degrees, I am out at an outdoor hockey rink, either making the ice or driving the Zamboni. We have our own Zamboni in our neighborhood. And when I talk to decision makers very often who've seen my LinkedIn profile, it's amazing how often the conversation of either hockey, Zamboni, outdoor hockey, or even Cubs comes up in the conversation. And as soon as that happens, the conversation's a whole lot easier. It's not just about my selling to them, it's about getting to know them. There's an academic term for this. It's called the Johari window. Johari, Johari window, created by two guys named Joe and Harry. And one of the flaws to most salespeople's approach to this is they try to figure out what are other people's interests first and then say something about themselves when there's a match. The problem is it takes too long and not very often will people share their interests. I think the best thing we can do as salespeople, share our own interests, put ourselves out there. As soon as we share a little bit about ourselves, the other person shares more about them. So that's all about be first, right? Be preferred. But the last piece is all about how do you find a way to be chosen. And this is some stuff based upon what Neil Rackham came up with. So you want to be first, you want to be preferred, but the whole piece right about being chosen is that people right near the end of the decision-making process, they look at the risk of being your customer. And they have to justify their decision to other people. So there's 5 ways that people generally justify a purchase. Wow, not a purchase. My apologies for the spelling mistake. It's what I call RIPES, and I'm going to start at the bottom. The first one is simplicity or time. One of the ways they justify it. Expenses, putting less stuff in, getting the same stuff out. So lowering expenses, same output. The next one, productivity. They put less in, but get the same amount out. Fewer inputs, more outputs. Image. Whether we like it or not, people very often buy based upon image. Now, some of these are ways that people justify to themselves. Some of these are how they justify to others. But the last one is risk avoidance. And this is the one that is most powerful. Most decision makers right near the end of the process become very risk averse. And this is where I'm going to share with you the power of this interesting thing called propinquity. Propinquity is the impact of nearness and the fact that people are more likely to trust somebody or view there to be less risk if somebody is just like them, same industry, same job, same aspirations, values, interests, someone who is near them from a geographical perspective, or someone they have a really good relationship with. One of the ways you can use LinkedIn to be able to do that on social selling, pick any person you want. I picked, in this case, Jamie Shanks, and I went to LinkedIn and I said, who do we have in common? So you can see here it says shared, 441 people in common. There is a search button right next to that empty box. And I actually did a search button. And I said, okay, I want to get into Microsoft, or I have Microsoft as a customer. How do I use my Microsoft context to get to Jamie? And it turns out these are all the people that Jamie is connected to. So when I talked up front about the power of testimonials and referrals, if you get them on a regular enough basis, what you can do is when you figure out, oh, I want to get to Jamie, let's go to my Microsoft person and let's either ask them if they're willing to be a reference or ask for some form of a testimonial. Now, while I get the endorsements on LinkedIn are great, I have like 9,000 of myself, almost 1,000 just for lead generation alone. But for me, it's all about the power of testimonials and referrals. And when you're first in, people are more likely to act as a reference, give you testimonials, or give you referrals. So that's my 25 minutes. It's all about being first. It's all about being preferred. It's all about being chosen. And if you would like my slides and a free copy of my book, just go to shiftselling.com/social. Fill in the form. I'll send it all to you